"Get out of the way," Preston Hayes barked, shoving the heavy glass door open with a forceful thrust of his shoulder. Nora Santos was on her hands and knees, the rough texture of the marble floor a familiar sensation against her skin. Her bucket of murky water sat beside her, carefully balanced to avoid a spill. It was 6 a.m., and the towering lobby of the corporate headquarters was still mostly empty, bathed in the cool, artificial light of the early morning. "I'm sorry, sir," she murmured, scrambling to get up, her movements quick and practiced. "Sorry? You're in the way," Preston snapped, stopping directly in front of her. He adjusted the knot of his expensive silk tie, his face a mask of impatience and disdain. "Isn't there another time to do this cleaning?" Nora held the damp cloth in her hands, the cold water seeping into her skin. She knew his type well. The young executive, full of self-importance, who believed the world revolved around his schedule. "I always clean at this time, sir. It's when there's the least amount of foot traffic." "Least amount of traffic? I'm walking here, aren't I?" Preston took a step forward, invading her personal space. "You people think you can do whatever you want, just because you get here early." A few other employees began to trickle into the lobby, their footsteps slowing as they took in the scene. A man in a tailored suit, a woman clutching a briefcase. They saw the tension, the imbalance of power, but no one said a word. They averted their eyes and quickened their pace. "I'll finish up quickly," Nora said softly, her gaze fixed on the floor as she prepared to kneel again. "No, you won't." With a sudden violent movement, Preston kicked the bucket. The gray, soapy water erupted, splashing across the polished marble and soaking Nora from head to toe. The plastic bucket clattered loudly as it rolled across the lobby, coming to a stop against a far wall. Nora froze, kneeling in the puddle, water dripping from her hair onto her face. Her simple worn uniform clung to her body, and the silence that filled the lobby was absolute. A dozen people had now witnessed the act, but they remained silent, their faces carefully blank. "There," Preston said, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Now you have some real traffic to clean up. Maybe next time you'll think about the schedule." He strode towards the elevators, his expensive leather shoes leaving wet footprints on the floor, as if he owned the very ground he walked on. The other employees scurried past, carefully avoiding Nora's gaze, pretending nothing had happened. Nora took a deep, steadying breath. It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated. It probably wouldn't be the last. She slowly got to her feet, picked up the empty bucket, and walked to the supply closet to get more water. Ethan Cole was leaning against a wall near the reception desk. He had arrived just a few minutes earlier and had seen the entire thing. It was his third day at the company, a junior analyst position that was his first real step into the corporate world. He was still learning the environment, the people, the unwritten rules of this place. He stood there frozen, watching Nora return with a full bucket. She didn't look at anyone, didn't complain, didn't cry. She simply started cleaning again, her movements methodical and calm, as if nothing had happened. "Son of a bitch," Ethan muttered under his breath. He wanted to do something. He should have done something. But he was the new guy. He didn't know anyone, didn't know how things worked here. And now it was too late. The moment had passed. Nora mopped the floor, cleaning up the water Preston had spilled. Her movements were steady, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world, as if she didn't care about the people who walked past her without so much as a "good morning." Ethan got into the elevator with a few other employees. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew it was wrong, but everyone pretended it hadn't happened. "Is that Preston guy always like that?" Ethan asked the man next to him in a low voice. "Always," the man replied, his eyes fixed on the floor numbers. "He's the son of the owner of Hayes Construction. They have a major stake in the holding company. He does what he wants and no one says a thing." The man shrugged. "Who's going to challenge him? We all need our jobs." Ethan thought about that for the rest of the morning. He couldn't get the image of Nora out of his head. Her dignity, her resilience, even after being publicly humiliated. At lunchtime, he went down to the lobby again. Nora was gone. She must have finished her cleaning and left. But Ethan could still see the whole scene playing out in his mind. He didn't know why, but he was sure he would see Nora again. And the next time, he would do something different, because he couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. That wasn't who he was. Or at least, it wasn't who he wanted to be. Ethan arrived home that evening with a heavy feeling in his chest. His small apartment was a chaotic landscape of unpacked boxes, a testament to his recent move to Chicago. He had been in the city for 3 weeks, but he still felt like a transient, as if he might have to leave at any moment. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sank onto the sofa, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed that morning. Nora, soaked and humiliated, and everyone else, including himself, pretending not to see. What a mess, he said to the empty room. His phone rang. It was Mrs. Eleanor, his adoptive mother, calling from their small town in Wisconsin. "Ethan, my boy, how are you? Are you getting used to that big city yet?" "I'm fine, Mom." He lied. "Work is challenging, but I'm learning a lot." "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "I sent another box with some of your old things. It should be arriving tomorrow or the day after." Ethan looked at the boxes already cluttering his living room. "You didn't have to do that, Mom. I don't have much space here. They're just memories, dear. Photos, documents, a few little things that might be important one day. You know I save everything." After he hung up, Ethan started rummaging through one of the boxes that had already arrived. Mrs. Eleanor really did save everything. School report cards, childhood drawings, old t-shirts, even his first pair of shoes. At the bottom of the box, he found a yellowed envelope filled with old photographs. Most of them were of him with Mrs. Eleanor and her husband, Mr. John, the only parents he had ever known. But one photo was different. It was a picture of him as a very small child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting on the lap of a woman he didn't recognize. She was a dark-haired woman with a wide, warm smile, wearing a simple dress. Behind them was a landscape that looked like it could be somewhere in the rural South, with small houses and a bright, harsh sun. Ethan turned the photo over. On the back, written in neat cursive, were the words, "Mrs. Maria, Juazeiro, 1996. Mrs. Maria. He didn't remember the name, the woman, or the place. He picked up his phone and called his mother back. "Mom, I found a photo here. It's of me on the lap of a woman named Mrs. Maria in a place called Juazeiro. Do you remember who she was?" On the other end of the line, Mrs. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Oh dear," she said finally, her voice soft. "That's a complicated story." "What story?" "Mrs. Maria was a very good woman who helped children from the South. She was the one who brought you to us when you were little." "Brought me? What do you mean? You don't remember anything from that time, do you? It's probably for the best. Mrs. Maria took care of boys who didn't have families or whose families couldn't raise them. She would find good families up north to adopt the children." Ethan looked at the photo again, trying to recall anything, a sound, a smell, a feeling, but there was nothing. "And what happened to her?" "I don't know, dear. After you came to live with us, we lost contact. But she was a saint, that woman. She saved the lives of so many children." The next morning, Ethan put the photo in his wallet. He didn't know why, but he felt it was important to carry that piece of his past with him. At work, he tried to focus on spreadsheets and reports, but his mind was divided between the photo and Nora, 2 women who seemed to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders without complaint. At lunchtime, he went down to the lobby, hoping to see Nora again. She was there, cleaning the glass doors at the entrance. This time, Ethan didn't hesitate. "Excuse me," he said, approaching her. Nora turned, surprised. She wasn't used to executives speaking to her, especially not after what had happened the day before. "Yes, sir. My name is Ethan. I work here at the company. I wanted to show you something, if you don't mind." Nora was suspicious, but she nodded. Ethan took the photo from his wallet and showed it to her. "Do you know this woman? Mrs. Maria from Juazeiro?" Nora looked at the photo and her expression changed completely. Her eyes filled with tears and she had to lean against the wall for support. "My God," she whispered. "Where did you get this?" "It's a photo of me when I was a child." "Why? Did you know her?" Nora took the photo with both hands, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "She was my mother," Nora said, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Maria was my mother." Now it was Ethan's turn to be speechless. "You were one of the boys she helped bring to the north," Nora continued, wiping away her tears. "She always talked about you all. She said one day she would find you again." Ethan felt the world spin. The woman who cleaned the floors of the company where he worked was the daughter of the person who had saved his life. "Your mother? Where is she?" Nora handed the photo back, a sad smile on her face. "She passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. But she died happy, knowing she had helped so many people have a better life." The 2 of them stood there in silence, processing the impossible discovery. In the following days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Nora. Whenever he saw her in the lobby or the hallways, he felt a strange mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She remained invisible to everyone else, but to him, she had become the most important person in that building. Preston, on the other hand, seemed to be getting worse every day. During a meeting, he yelled at his secretary because she hadn't been able to book a lunch reservation he wanted. The following week, he caused a scene in the elevator because the security guard took 2 seconds too long to press the button for his floor. "Do you people have any idea who you're dealing with?" He sneered at the guard. "I could have half this company fired if I wanted to." Ethan was in the elevator and saw the whole thing. The guard, a man in his 60s, just lowered his head and apologized. Another public humiliation that everyone pretended not to see. "That guy is sick," Ethan commented to a colleague from accounting. "He's the son of the owner of Hayes Construction," the colleague explained over coffee. "They own 40% of the holding company here. His father, Mr. Anthony, is a good man, but the son has turned into a monster. And no one says anything to the father? Who's going to? Mr. Anthony hardly ever comes here anymore. They say he's sick, and Preston makes sure everyone knows he's going to inherit everything." Ethan started paying more attention to the company's details. He discovered that the holding company controlled several smaller businesses: Hayes Construction, 2 logistics companies, a tech firm, and a general services company. It was a large enterprise with hundreds of employees. But what intrigued him most was Nora. She knew every corner of the building, knew everyone's name, from the executives to the security guards. Whenever someone needed information about something that had happened in the company, they always ended up asking her. "How long has Nora been here?" Ethan asked the receptionist one day. "Oh, forever. She started cleaning the offices, then became the cleaning supervisor, and now she takes care of the whole building. A hard-working woman. She knows everything that goes on here." "Does she have a family?" "Not that I know of. She lives alone. They say she took care of a wealthy old woman for a long time before she came to work here." That piece of information stuck in Ethan's head. A cleaning lady who had taken care of a wealthy old woman. It seemed strange. During his lunch break, he went to find Nora. He found her in the supply closet, organizing cleaning materials. "Nora, can I talk to you for a minute?" She turned, still a little wary. Ever since they had discovered their connection through Mrs. Maria, Ethan had been trying to strike up conversations with her, but Nora always kept her distance. "Of course, Mr. Cole." "Please stop with the Mr. Cole. We practically grew up together." Nora smiled for the first time since they had met. "It's strange to think about it, isn't it? My mother always said she would find you all again. I just never imagined it would be like this." "Like what?" "You, successful, in a suit and tie. And me, well, cleaning the floor you walk on." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. "Don't say that. It's honest work. There's nothing shameful about it." "I know. My mother taught me that. But it's funny how life puts people in different places, isn't it?" "Nora, can I ask you something a little personal?" She nodded. "The receptionist said you took care of a wealthy lady before you came to work here. What was that like?" Nora was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much she could say. "Mrs. Albertina. I took care of her for 12 years. She was a very lonely woman, with a lot of money, but no family. When she passed away, I was a bit lost. Then I got this job here." "Did she treat you well?" "She did. In the end, she said I was like a daughter to her. She even—" Nora stopped mid-sentence. "Well, that doesn't matter anymore." Ethan could tell she was hiding something, but he didn't want to press. "The important thing is that you're a good person. Your mother would be proud." Nora smiled again, but this time it seemed sad. "I hope so." That afternoon, Ethan decided to do some research on the company. He wanted to better understand the corporate structure, who the owners were, how decisions were made. That's when he found a piece of information that intrigued him. On the list of shareholders of the holding company, besides Hayes Construction with its 40%, there were several other smaller companies. One of them caught his eye: NS Holdings LLC, with 15% of the shares. NS Holdings, Nora Santos. It couldn't be a coincidence. Ethan spent the entire night digging into NS Holdings LLC. He couldn't find much online. It was a privately held investment company, registered 8 years ago, with no public-facing website and minimal public records beyond the basics. But the owner's name was there, clear as day: Eleonora Santos, the same Nora he saw cleaning the floors every day. The next morning, He arrived at the office with a sense of urgency he hadn't felt before. He had to clear this up. He went down to the lobby and found Nora in the supply closet, organizing cleaning products as she did every morning. "Nora, I need to talk to you. It's important." She could tell from the serious tone of his voice that something was different. "What happened?" "NS Holdings," he said, his voice low. "That's you, isn't it?" Nora stopped what she was doing. For a few seconds, she was completely still, the bottle of glass cleaner frozen in her hand. Then she let out a long, slow sigh, the kind of sigh that comes from a secret finally being brought into the light. "How did you find out?" "I saw it on the list of shareholders for the holding company. 15% of the shares. Nora, that means you're the second largest shareholder in this entire corporation." "Yes," she said, sitting down on an old wooden stool in the cramped closet. Right after Hayes' construction, Ethan's mind reeled. He couldn't process the information. But how? Why are you working here as a cleaner if you own a significant part of the company? Nora looked at her own calloused hands, hands that had seen years of hard work. "Mrs. Albertina, the lady I took care of, she had no children. When she passed away, she left me a considerable amount of money and some shares in companies she had invested in. This holding company was one of them. And you decided to increase your stake? Over time, yes. Some of the smaller partners wanted to get out of the business and they sold their shares cheap. I started buying them up slowly, without anyone noticing. Mrs. Albertina's lawyer helped me set up NS Holdings so my name wouldn't appear directly." Ethan sat down on a cardboard box, trying to wrap his head around the revelation. "But why do you keep working as a cleaner? You could be in the boardroom making decisions." Nora smiled, but it was a different kind of smile. It wasn't the shy, reserved smile she usually wore. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "I was raised to see far, Ethan, even without binoculars. Where I come from, you learn that you don't have to shout to be heard. In this company, only the ones who shout, who make a scene, get noticed. I prefer to observe." "Observe what?" "Everything," she said, her voice taking on a new weight. "How people treat those they think are beneath them. How they act when they think no one important is watching. You learn a lot about a person's character when they think you're invisible." Ethan began to understand. Nora wasn't just a cleaner who had inherited money. She was a strategist, a woman who had chosen to stay in the shadows to see the truth behind the facade. "And what have you seen so far?" "I've seen that there are a lot of good people in this company. Honest, hardworking people who deserve respect. And I've seen that there are people who think they can step on others just because they have a fancy title." She didn't have to say the name. They both knew who she was talking about. "Preston has no idea who you are. He doesn't even know I exist. To him, I'm just another piece of furniture in the company. Someone who cleans up the messes he makes. Nora, you have the power to change things here. Why don't you use it?" She stood up, picked up a cloth, and started wiping a shelf that was already clean, her movements deliberate. "Power without wisdom is dangerous, Ethan. My mother taught me that. She could have gotten rich selling children to any family that would pay, but she chose carefully. She looked for real families, people who would love and care for you all. And what does that have to do with the company? Everything. It's no use for me to march into the boardroom and fire everyone I don't like. That doesn't solve anything. People have to learn. They have to truly change. Otherwise, I just become like Preston, only on the opposite side." Ethan was deeply impressed by her wisdom. Nora had spent years observing, learning, waiting for the right moment. But what if things get worse? What if Preston keeps humiliating people? Nora stopped cleaning and looked at him directly, her eyes clear and steady. "Then I'll have to make a decision. But when I do, it will be at the right time, in the right way, not out of anger or revenge, but for justice. And when will that right moment be? When he crosses a line that can't be uncrossed? When he hurts someone in a way that can't be undone?" Ethan left that conversation with the certainty that he was witnessing something much bigger than he had imagined. Nora wasn't just a wealthy cleaner. She was a strategist, a woman of immense patience and moral clarity, and he had a feeling that the moment she was waiting for was fast approaching. Things started to go downhill quickly for Preston. In the following 2 weeks, he managed to create 3 major crises in the company. First, he canceled an important contract with a key materials supplier because the manager didn't answer his call on the first try. The company had to pay a hefty penalty and scramble to find another supplier. causing significant delays on a major project. Then he fired 2 long-time employees from the accounting department because they questioned a strange expense he had submitted. The problem was, they were right. Preston had used the corporate card to pay for a lavish personal vacation. Finally, he held a meeting with all the department managers where he yelled at everyone, called them incompetent, and threatened to clean house if things didn't improve. "Do you think this is a game?" he bellowed in the conference room, his face red with fury. "I was born into this company. You are all employees, and employees obey, or they hit the street." Ethan was in that meeting. He saw experienced colleagues, people who had worked at the company for over a decade, leave the room with tears in their eyes, their morale shattered. "That guy has lost his mind," a colleague from marketing commented later. "He thinks he owns the place. Someone has to do something," Ethan replied, his voice low. "Who?" "His father doesn't come here anymore. The board only meets once a year. We're at his mercy." But Ethan remembered his conversation with Nora. She had said she was waiting for the right moment. Maybe that moment had arrived. That afternoon, he went to find her in the supply closet. "Did you hear what happened in the meeting today?" "I did," she replied, her face grim as she organized the cleaning materials. "So, is it time?" Nora sighed, a long, weary sound. "Not yet. He's attacking the employees, but he still hasn't crossed the line that can't be uncrossed." "What is that line, Nora? What could be worse than this?" "You'll know when it's time," she said, her voice firm. 3 days later, Ethan found out what that line was. Preston arrived at the office early in the morning, visibly agitated. He had clearly been drinking the night before and was in a foul mood. When he got into the elevator, he ran into Mr. Joseph, the oldest security guard in the company, a man who had been with the firm since its inception. "Why is this elevator so slow?" Preston complained, his voice sharp. "Sorry, Mr. Hayes, it seems to be having a technical problem today." "A technical problem? You people can't even take care of an elevator. How are you supposed to take care of security?" Mr. Joseph tried to explain that he had already called maintenance, but Preston didn't want to hear it. "You know what? You're too old for this job. You should retire and make way for someone younger." "But sir, I still have 5 years until retirement." "So what? I can fire you today if I want to." The elevator stopped on the 10th floor, and Mr. Joseph got out, his head bowed in humiliation. He was 65 years old, a kind man who was respected by everyone in the building. Ethan saw the whole scene and felt his blood boil, but the worst was yet to come. At lunchtime, Preston went down to the lobby and found Nora cleaning the floor near the reception desk. "You there!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the large space. "Come here." Nora approached, holding the damp cloth in her hands. "Yes, sir? This floor is a disgrace. Don't you know how to clean properly?" Nora looked at the floor, which was gleaming under the bright lights. "I just cleaned it, sir." "You just cleaned it? It's dirty." Preston stomped his foot hard on the wet floor, deliberately leaving a muddy footprint. "Now it's even dirtier. Clean it again." Nora took a deep breath and started cleaning again, her movements calm and deliberate. "Slower," Preston ordered, a cruel smile on his face. "I want to see you really putting in some effort." A few people stopped to watch. It was a public humiliation, and everyone knew it. "You know what your problem is?" Preston continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "You people think you can slack off because no one complains. But that doesn't work with me. I demand quality." Nora continued to clean in silence, her face a mask of stoicism. "In fact," Preston said, his voice taking on a decisive tone, "since I'm talking about quality, I think it's time to change the cleaning staff. We'll hire a third-party company. It'll be cheaper, and they'll do a better job." That's when Nora stopped cleaning. She slowly straightened up, her back straight, her shoulders squared. She looked at him directly, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes. Only a cold, hard resolve. "Are you sure about that, sir?" "I am, and I don't like being questioned by a cleaner." Nora stood up slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Then I think it's time we had a conversation." "In a board meeting?" Preston burst out laughing, a harsh, ugly sound. "A board meeting? Have you lost your mind?" "No, sir," Nora said, her voice clear and steady. "I am a shareholder of this company. I have the right to a voice and a vote on the board." The smile vanished from Preston's face, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. "Are you kidding me?" "I don't joke about business," Nora said, her voice as cold as steel. "I am requesting an extraordinary board meeting for this afternoon. You will receive the official summons in 1 hour." Nora gathered her cleaning supplies, her movements calm and unhurried. She walked out of the lobby, leaving Preston standing there, his mouth agape, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Ethan watched it all from a distance and felt a shiver run down his spine. Nora had waited for the right moment. She had waited for him to cross the line. And now, the war had begun. The news of the extraordinary board meeting spread through the company like wildfire. Within 2 hours, the entire building was buzzing with speculation. Everyone knew that a mysterious shareholder had called a meeting to discuss inappropriate conduct in management, and the timing, immediately after Preston's public humiliation of Nora, was too coincidental to ignore. Preston spent the entire afternoon in a frantic state of denial and rage. He stormed through the executive floor trying to find out who this shareholder was. He called the company's lawyer, the head of accounting, anyone who might have information. No one could give him a straight answer. NS Holdings LLC, the accountant finally told him over the phone, his voice hesitant. They own 15% of the shares. It's a company registered 8 years ago, always up to date with all its obligations. But who owns it? Preston demanded. I can't give you that information over the phone, Mr. Hayes, but the owner will be at the meeting at 5 o'clock. Preston slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. New partner, old shareholder, they're all puppets, he yelled at a junior executive who had the misfortune of walking past his office. I run this place. My father founded this company. The executive scurried away without a word, but inside, he was eager to see what would happen. At 4:30 p.m., the boardroom on the top floor was already filling up. The chairman of the board, Mr. U. Romaglio, a distinguished man in his late 60s, was there, along with representatives from the other partner companies, some key department heads, and Preston, who couldn't stop pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Where is this so-called shareholder? He asked every minute, his voice tight with anxiety. They should be arriving soon, Mr. Romaglio replied patiently, though his own curiosity was palpable. Ethan had managed to get permission from his department head to attend the meeting as an observer. He knew what was going to happen, but his heart was still pounding with anticipation. At 5 o'clock sharp, the secretary knocked on the heavy oak door. Mr. Romaglio, the representative from NS Holdings has arrived. Send them in. The door opened slowly. Nora walked into the room. She was no longer in her cleaning uniform. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue suit. Her hair was neatly styled, and she carried a brown leather briefcase. She was the same Nora as always, but at the same time, she was a completely different person. A complete, stunned silence fell over the room. Preston went as white as a sheet, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Good afternoon, Nora said, her voice firm and calm, resonating with an authority no one in that room had ever heard from her. My name is Eleonora Santos. I am the owner of NS Holdings LLC and a shareholder of this holding company with 15% of the common stock. Mr. Romaglio stood up, clearly taken aback. Mrs. Santos, please have a seat. We weren't expecting. I know, Nora said, a faint knowing smile on her lips as she sat down in the empty chair at the head of the table. You weren't expecting the building's cleaner to be a shareholder, but life is full of surprises. Preston remained standing, looking as if he had seen a ghost. This is a joke. She can't be a shareholder. She cleans the floors. Mr. Hayes, please, sit down, Mr. Romaglio requested, his tone firm. We will verify Mrs. Santos's documentation and then proceed with the meeting. Nora opened her briefcase and took out a stack of impeccably organized documents. Here are the share certificates, the company's registration, the balance sheets from the last few years, and the payment receipts for all the dividends. Everything is in order. The company's lawyer took the documents and began to check them one by one, his eyes widening with each page he turned. After 10 minutes, he nodded at Mr. Romaglio. Everything is correct. Mrs. Eleonora Santos has the right to a voice and a vote on this board. Perfect, Nora said, her voice calm and steady. Then let's get to the reason for this meeting. She took out a thick-bound report from her briefcase and began to distribute copies to everyone at the table. This is a detailed report on the inappropriate conduct of a member of this company's management. Conduct that is harming the work environment, productivity, and the company's image. Preston finally managed to sit down, but he was trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. What are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing. I'm presenting facts, Nora replied, her voice as cold as steel. Cancellation of contracts for personal reasons, resulting in fines. Use of the corporate card for personal expenses. Unjustified dismissals. public humiliation of employees. She turned the pages of the report, her voice never wavering as she detailed dates, names, and amounts. It's all here, with witnesses, documents, and receipts. Mr. Ramalho flipped through the report, his expression growing more grim with each page. Mrs. Santos, how did you get all this information? Nora smiled for the first time since she had entered the room, a small, sad smile. Sir, when you're invisible, people do everything in front of you. They say what they shouldn't say, do what they shouldn't do, and treat people poorly because they think no one important is watching. She looked directly at Preston, her gaze unwavering. But someone is always watching. Someone is always paying attention. Preston tried to defend himself, stammering, his voice rising in a desperate attempt to regain control. But Nora continued to present the facts with a calm, irrefutable precision. It was the end of his reign, and everyone in the room knew it. This is a setup, Preston shouted, slamming his hands on the table. She made all this up, a cleaner trying to take me down. Mr. Hayes, please maintain your composure, Mr. Ramalho said, his voice now sharp with irritation. Nora remained seated, calm, as if Preston's outburst were just a distant, insignificant noise. May I continue? She asked politely. Of course, Mrs. Santos. Please, proceed. She turned a page in the report. Page 15. On March 12th, Mr. Hayes fired an employee, Marina Costa, because she questioned an expense of $8,000 at a luxury restaurant. The expense was made on a Sunday when the company was closed and there were no clients or suppliers present. The company's accountant, who was in the meeting, nodded. That's true. I questioned that expense as well, but Mr. Hayes said it was for networking. Networking alone? Nora asked, holding up the receipt for everyone to see. Because it says here it was for 2 people only. Preston was red with rage. I don't have to explain my expenses to a cleaner. Yes, you do. Mr. Ramalho interrupted, his patience clearly gone. Mrs. Santos is a shareholder. You have to explain. Yes. Nora continued, her voice a steady, relentless rhythm. Page 22. Cancellation of the contract with the supplier, our partner for 8 years, because the manager didn't answer the phone on the first try. The result? A $60,000 fine and a delay in the mall construction project. They were disrespectful. Preston tried to defend himself. The manager was in the hospital having emergency surgery. Nora retorted, her voice sharp. I called the company and they confirmed it. You didn't even bother to ask why he didn't answer. With every page Nora turned, Preston seemed to shrink further in his chair. The other board members exchanged worried, uncomfortable glances. Page 36, Nora continued. Threat of dismissal to Mr. Joseph Ferreira, a security guard who has been with the company for 15 years, because of a technical problem with the elevator that was not his responsibility. That was just a reprimand. Preston protested weakly. You said, and I quote, "You're too old for this job. You should retire and make way for someone younger. I can fire you today if I want to." Nora read directly from her notes. That's not a reprimand. That's workplace harassment. Mr. Ramalho closed the report he was reading, his face a mask of grim resolve. Mrs. Santos, what do you propose we do? Everyone in the room fell silent, their eyes fixed on Nora. Preston was sweating, his face pale. Ethan felt his heart pounding in his ears. Nora closed her briefcase and looked at each person at the table, her gaze steady and unwavering. I could ask for Mr. Hayes's immediate dismissal. I have enough votes for that, considering that 3 of the smaller shareholders have already approached me in recent months complaining about his management. Preston opened his mouth to protest, but Nora held up a hand, silencing him. But I'm not going to do that. Everyone was surprised, including Ethan. It would be too easy to just fire him, Nora continued, her voice thoughtful. That doesn't teach anything. It doesn't solve the underlying problem. What is your proposal then? Mr. Ramalho asked, his voice filled with a newfound respect. Nora stood up and walked to the window of the room, which overlooked the lobby where she cleaned the floor every day. Mr. Hayes's problem isn't a lack of competence. It's a lack of humility. He's never come down from his high horse. He's never known the ground floor. She turned to face Preston directly, her eyes locking with his. My proposal is that Mr. Hayes be removed from his executive management position for 6 months. During that period, he will work directly with the company's operational sectors. He will get to know the work of each employee firsthand, from cleaning to security. That's humiliating, Preston shouted, his voice cracking. No, Nora replied calmly. her voice as soft as steel. "It's an education. You will learn to value the work of every person here. You will understand that everyone has their importance. And if I refuse, then I will ask for your immediate dismissal. And this time, I'm sure I'll have the necessary votes." Mr. Ramalho looked at the other board members, his expression serious. "Let's vote. Who is in favor of Mrs. Santos's proposal?" One by one, the hands went up. In the end, there were 6 votes in favor and only 1 against. Preston's proposal approved, Mr. Ramalho announced, his voice firm. "Mr. Hayes, you have 48 hours to report to the Human Resources Department and receive your new assignments." Preston sat in his chair, his head bowed, unable to speak, a broken man. Nora gathered her documents in her briefcase, her movements calm and deliberate. "A productive meeting," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work." She left the room, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Ethan followed her into the hallway, his mind reeling. "Nora, why didn't you ask for his dismissal?" She smiled, and this time it was the smile of the humble cleaner he knew, a smile filled with a quiet, profound wisdom. "Because my mother taught me that everyone deserves a chance to become a better person, even people like Preston." And as she walked away, her footsteps echoing in the silent hallway, Ethan knew he had just witnessed something extraordinary. He had seen true power, not the kind that shouts and intimidates, but the kind that observes, that understands, and that in the end chooses justice over revenge.